Well, I'm going to talk about Andrew and his life of drug and therapeutics bulletin. And I'm going to talk about what I think was his actual single greatest achievement. There's no question. I listened to all the things he's done. Obviously, he's done a great deal. But I think the single greatest achievement, the one for which he really should be known best, is his establishing and running the drug and therapeutics bulletin. It changed his life. It changed our lives. It was an enormous, enormous effort, and it showed him at his best. He wasn't working with anybody else, he was working by himself. So I put it this way, he was thrusting it forward by himself. And I think it was an extraordinary period. Now that happened, it started in 1962, and it went on to 1992. That's 30 years of his life he was devoting it to bulletin. Now, that's a big chunk in a career. That's the bit that really matters. That's when your energies are up. That's when your brain is at its best. You don't need support. You go through the period of energy, then arrogance, and then you fade off. And he did like to do. And it was a very important period. It was, in fact, as I can see, the lion's share of his creativity. Now, it's a bit awkward to say that in these fine amongst you, but that's how I see it, because he was there by himself, learning a trade. This is when I think he learned his trade. And luckily some of us were with him. What was this thing called the drug and therapeutics bulletin? Well, you need to know that, many won't have seen it. It was it varied a bit over the 30 years. It was a 8-page paper, bulletin paper. In those days there wasn't email or anything like that. It was sent out on paper. Which produced independent, evidence-based, impartial assessments advising doctors on the best use of therapeutic interventions in the interest of consumers. Now there's an extraordinary list for the 60s. Imagine that. There he was, pioneer. Now we've heard about mailers and other people's views, but there he was producing the really evidence-based medicine, impartial assessments. Now this is an extraordinary idea, advising the doctor on the best use of therapeutic measures in the interest of patients. It was the beginning of his great desire to inform people. He was saying to doctors, that's what patients need. That's an extraordinary idea, and that's what he created. In its heyday, it was probably one of the most influential things in the UK, and possibly worldwide. I don't know about that, but certainly. It had a readership of 90,000 doctors. A monopoly position of information. Imagine that. You just don't get that. He was able to bring together one thought bubble every fortnight of a month, all GPs, all doctors in the UK. And they trusted him. And they loved what he had to say. And he attached himself, he worked with them and for them to advise on patient welfare. And at that time, DTV was in fact UK medicine think tank. Remember, it was before NICE, before the Cochrane. It was by itself. It was the great think tank. It's what we were producing information and thinking about solutions that no one was thinking about. It was an extraordinary period. Now, there's me pomping away, which is what I do very well. And I better tell you what rights I've got. Can I legitimately pomp? No. I'm going to try and persuade my niece that I'm allowed to pomp.
Let's see.
Well, see. I have known Andrew for a long time. My name is Joe Collier. I've known Andrew for a long time. I was his brother-in-law, in fact, for a while, and therefore I knew Andrew before I knew these two, because they came later. So I've known. That gives me a right. So that's 50-something years. I better be careful I say 57 years on that. And actually, as a brother-in-law, he was prickly, difficult, and we didn't really get on. And we never really got on on a personal level. But that doesn't stop me admiring him enormously. As a work colleague, he was absolutely outstanding. This is very important. He was, I began working with him when I was about 25, and I worked with him first editing individual articles, and then more. Then ultimately, I became deputy editor of Bulletin, and I finally took over from him in 1992. But I watched him and listened to him, worked with him very closely. He, in fact, became my mentor, we've mentioned that, my teacher and a role model. Now, role models are arranged in animals. I've got several people I can identify as role models. I've got a role model for research. I've got a role model for lecturing. I've got a role model for thinking. And that's an extraordinary idea. We were discussing it on the way out there. Professor Dornhorst, whose mind was just so wonderful. I loved that because he was my role model. And then I have a role model, Andrew, for writing and communicating. So, I think that this is an important idea, that while we didn't get on well privately, we got on extraordinarily well professionally, and it was a great treat to be with him, an enormous treat, and I admire him enormously for that. What was his influence? Well, may I repeat that in his role as DTB's founder and editor, Andrew was an extraordinary man. His work affected prescribing and prescribing attitudes throughout the UK. What an extraordinary idea that is. That was a period where, prior to that, the drug industry dominated thinking a lot, government dominated a bit, but by the time he left, the drug authorities bulletin ideals for dominating people and dominating doctors, an enormous change. And don't forget that was before, as I said, NICE and the Cochrane collaboration. And these notions, that his attitudes, his views, his approach embodied his view of life. So there was the bulletin, there was his life, and they mixed. There was a melange between the two. It's very important to realise how the DTB worked, the Drug Authority Bulletin worked. As I say, it was founded by Andrew in '62. After he came back from 2 years in the USA, we've heard that he admired the medical letter on drugs and therapeutics in the States. He approached the consumer section. A very interesting idea that. He approached the consumer section, which is a consumer lobby group, who accepted his proposal. The deal he had with the Consumer Association was they would provide publishing skill, we didn't have any of that as such, legal advice, warm home and lights, the usual thing, office, and of course financial stability. He would provide text. And that was his work. He would provide them text and they would publish. How were the articles produced? That's again very important. They were commissioned by the bulletins from experts. They were dotted around mainly the UK. They would come in, they were peer-reviewed, verified, rewritten, written, checked, made accessible to the reader, and then published. Now, in that process, many people have already said how influential he was in individuals writing texts, commenting, changing, and so on. And Andrew, of course, was very, very influential. They were published anonymously, but it was Andrew who was crucial to those. So there were 1,500 articles, which he had a major input in, that we won't have heard of. They are secret articles that Andrew would have worked on, honed, and influenced. And they won't be named, but they were absolutely crucial. And of course, others in the team, there's Tim over there, and I there, well, so we all worked on them, but Andrew was the main steerer of pieces of them. We can say that. Maybe Tim's going to say that, but anyhow, I'm looking at you, Tim. Let's think, what were his outstanding qualities? Well, he was original. He was a visionary. When you think about his business about evidence-based, verifiable material, he was indeed the ears and eyes of a bothering prescriber. But the bothering prescriber would have done what he did if only they knew how to do it. They couldn't, he did it at the time. And his originality, sometimes excessive. He's a bit, I often thought it was a bit like a cathode wheel with sparks. It's pumped up by sparking. And part of my job and others' job was to say, hold on, it's not quite like that. And we used to have to control him like we would always have to control his pumps. You had to control Andrew, but when you did that, and you listened very carefully, there's an awful lot there that was brilliant. A few things that were mad as hatters, but we all know that. He was an extraordinary man. He was an idealist. Fancy wanting to produce material for patients. He was independent, well, we know that too. It reflected his own life. In the Drug and Therapeutics Bulletin, he thought independently. There were no adverts, no money from industry, no money directly from government, no conflicts of interest. He was independent. And in that independence, he wanted to be trusted. He wanted people to know that man knows what he's doing, he's honest and decent, and he was. He was a trusted mass of sensible prescribing in the UK, and that's an extraordinary position to be in. And it's something that I learned from him, the importance of trust. It took years to build up, dashed in a day. His trust in Andrew was never dashed. But he took that, all this stuff he took with him to later work at Oxford. I mean, this is all the beginnings of his life. Because he wasn't writing and he wasn't thinking these things when he was writing a lot of those papers. This is all came when he was writing the very good his book. He was generous, we know. He helped anybody with writing. He was hard-working, all hours, hectic, we all knew that. Sometimes he got up my people's noses, and quite commonly got up my wife's nose when he phoned up at 1 time a day, right? And in fact, we had to stop it. One of the difficulties we had was, Andrew, no, that's not what we do in society, but there you go. Other people were more tolerant, I hear. He was also fearless. He took on individuals, companies, governments, as and when. There was occasion when we were on the edge of being sued by a drug company. And the drug company said we must meet. We met him. We met them. I was with him, feeling a bit worried about what was going to happen next. And we were saying this drug wasn't very good. We weren't absolutely sure. But the drug company said something which made us pretty clear that it wasn't any good. So we strengthened the conclusion. He was fearless. I mean, it was an extraordinary moment where he thought, problem, and we published a much stronger conclusion saying this was a really awful drug. So that was Andrew very much. But he was in fact fearless, but he was also fair. I mean, he never favoured me as a writer or anybody else as a writer. He didn't mind what he did with, people he didn't like, he was very fair with. And one of the things that we did was when we sent articles for criticism, who did we send them to? Drug companies. And who best to send to? Competitive drug companies. They'll tell you what's wrong with the antiversal stuff. So we had a very interesting relationship with drug companies, which was really fostered by Andrew's insight. Get your enemies to work on your behalf, right? He was a wonderful, I say he was fearless, but there were occasions when he was a bit frightening. It reminds me how suddenly there was an article on erectile dysfunction, which means impotence, and we were going to go on the radio, and he fucking disappeared. And poor old Tim had to face the music. And I had a similar. He suddenly disappeared when we did an article on wind, and we had to. Belching was easy, but we couldn't find. But we had to invent the word downwind, which was a fart. Now, I don't mind amongst friends here mentioning the word fart. It's common to my family, common to me, but now, but in fact, saying on the radio fart was very, very difficult. But Andrew wasn't there to say it. To 4 million people one morning, how you could or couldn't reduce farting. But Andrew was quite cunning that way. I don't know where he went. Although he was fearless, he was in fact fearless, but there was a sort of touch of the Puritanic, I suppose, I don't know. But when I say he was fair, he was a very fair man, and he criticised himself as much as us. Now, this is a very important observation. Several people here have said that when Andrew criticised their work, they felt crestfallen. Andrew said, it's out there, it's not you who should feel crestfallen, it's the page that's being criticised. And I learned that very early on, that it was the article that was being criticised, it wasn't the person who wrote it. And with that we were able to go ahead, far away, and we never concerned ourselves with criticism of change or whatever. Why should it? It was the page which was outside which was being criticised. It's worth remembering that. Most of all, and this is something we've said, but it was extraordinary how skilled he was as a writer-communicator. Now, I've listed a few things he understood. Brevity. Well, we all know how important it was for brevity. And we mentioned logic as a logical line. He was very keen on logic. You don't repeat something, you go on and on and on. The story has to be told in a logical way. He was very important to him was linguistic purity, and in fact was touched upon that grammar, careful use of words, never use two words, never use passive, and so on. He had a whole set of linguistic purities which made for understanding. He was a great believer in inclusivity. He didn't say something which excluded a reader. And that's something people don't think about. You know, you can use a long word for a disease or something like that, but he never would do that without explaining it or avoiding it or whatever. He didn't want to exclude people. He didn't like any notion of ambiguity. Anything that smacked of ambiguity was out. And of course he was clear. Now, one of the interesting things about his clarity, which people don't know about yet, is that the message must be clear. Now, that's so obvious. But when you look at any of the conclusions he wrote, it was a clear message. Do this, don't do this. That's what it was. We believe don't do that. Try getting a message out of a lot of the conclusions now in the BMJ. You wouldn't know what they're thinking. It's all clever wording, ifs, buts, possible, conditionals. No, Andrew never did that. There must be an absolutely clear sentence that says what GPs or doctors should do. What a wonderful idea that was. And you see it spreading right through his work, the notion of clarity. And of course, he was a man of many parts, and visual clarity was important too. And I don't know if you know, when you look at the bulletin, or when we were working on it, he loved Times New Roman text, because it's authoritative, clear. He would have bothered to get the right typeface, to make it authoritative and clear. And you'll see that's part of his mindset, and that's possibly why he was married to my sister in the first place, because of the notion of art and the notion of clarity. So, his legacy. Well, in the bulletin, he created that, through the bulletin, I should say, he created an atmosphere of independent questioning, which he did, of striving for the truth, of providing information in the interest of patients. That all started with the DTB, and we've seen it again and again today. That went on when he retired, it went on to Cochrane. That notion of questioning, independent questioning. I have to say, thank Andrew, because that